March 11, 2011, 2:46 p.m. A massive earthquake occurs, the like of which no one has ever experienced. The Great East Japan Earthquake. From an epicenter off the Pacific coast in Japan's Tohoku region, the quake registers at a magnitude of 9.0, making it the largest in recorded Japanese history. The massive tsunami resulting from the earthquake devastates the Pacific coast, mostly in Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima prefectures. Multiple areas are wiped out. The casualties, 19,747 dead, 2,556 missing, and 122,005 houses completely destroyed. On the Japanese island of Honshu in the Tohoku region, Higashi-Matsushima is a city of approximately 40,000 people located in eastern Miyagi Prefecture. Bordering the Pacific Ocean to its south, the city has a rich natural environment with a thriving marine product industry, cultivating kelp and oysters. Its beautiful ocean views of the islands are considered one of the three views of Japan. About an hour after the Great East Japan earthquake, a tsunami beyond expectations struck the coast, killing 1,110 people, including quake-related deaths. The whereabouts of 23 victims remain unknown to this day. The tsunami was devastating, flooding approximately 65% of the city and destroying 11,073 houses, which account for about 73% of all households. Namba Kazuyuki, a city official during the disaster response at the time, reflects on the state of the city after the earthquake and through the subsequent recovery work. It was a Friday. It was the afternoon after 2 p.m. So we were all busy at work when everything started shaking for a very long time. Halfway through it, I knew this was trouble, and then the quake just continued for even longer. This didn't feel like your average earthquake. I sensed that we'd need to prepare for the worst, that we were in for difficult times. But honestly, we still had no idea that the huge tsunami was coming. My boss divided us into three-man teams to check on opening up shelters, having us each drive out in our cars. For starters, the situation was what it was, and we knew that unless we acted, no one could do anything, so we poured ourselves into it. At the same time, we were each devoted to protecting ourselves and our families. But we knew that in the end, we were the only ones that could hold the town together. At the time, the mayor told us, knowing that each of us had suffered individually, that he was sorry to have to ask, but that the town needed us, and that only we could save our town. Those were his first words to us. And so to us, we were working focused on that, and our families and homes became secondary. We were on a mission. That was a big part of it. We were the town officials, the most familiar faces in town. We felt this strong sense of mission, that we had to act, that we were like the town's ultimate safety net and had to do something to rebuild and restore the town. And so surprisingly, we didn't feel tired or get all that hungry. The fatigue was always there. Almost every night, we slept on the cold floor, so it wasn't restful, but we just kept plodding forward. It was that strong sense of mission that kept us going most of all.
まだまだ大丈夫だっていう形の中でやっていったっていう中はやっぱり使命感が一番強かったのかなというところですね。はい。
The city of Higashi-Matsushima started in 2005 when two neighbouring towns merged. Following the merger, the city foresaw troubling times ahead, struggling to manage all government services with the limited financial and human resources at hand, and tackle issues such as depopulation and reduced tax revenues due to declining birth rates and ageing, all the while meeting diversifying resident needs. Thus, it has looked to promote resident-based community development as a means to rally the community together and prepare for the future. Here are the aims of community-led community development, in which those in the community help one another without relying solely on the government. In a revision of community and city roles, the community and city collaborate as equal partners to reach common local goals and resolve issues. Such community development through civic cooperation has been underway since before the disasters. Since the earthquake, this system has laid the foundation for collaborative reconstruction and development of the community, combining resident and local government efforts. 9 months after the earthquake in December 2011, Higashi-Matsushima City formulated the Higashi-Matsushima City Reconstruction Development Plan. In formulating this plan, the city solicited public opinions and fully reflected these opinions into the plan, exchanging views and holding workshops with more than 2,000 residents. Part of the plan included concrete terms for a mass relocation project, establishing 7 new relocation sites in the city for residents affected by the tsunami who lost their homes, to develop communities in which residents can live safely and securely. And exactly what system did a city with no such experience establish and implement in its large-scale relocation of residents?
はい。やはり集団移転っていう部分
Mass relocations were one issue that came up.
出てきたので、やはり専門部署を設ける必要があるんじゃないか。
In our talks on whether we needed to establish a dedicated department for relocation, there was much debate on which department should handle it. Initially, opinions were that the Civic Cooperation section should head things up.
ですけども、やはり特化した形の中で集団移転は進める必要があるんじゃないかという話になって。
Then thinking shifted towards the need for a section devoted specifically to the mass relocation. Thus we started the Relocation Measures Division, which contained the new Relocation Support Team to oversee all the mass relocations.
支援サポートをしていくっていう形の部分をの部署を立ち上げたという形です。
This team acts as the department to support the residents in building up their communities after mass relocation.
配置されただけだったので、集団移転地が7つ、それに対して専門的に
For starters, only a few members were assigned to the relocation support team.
配置されなかったっていうところもあるので、7つのところを5人で対応するという。
A staff of 5 was assigned to handle mass relocation at 7 sites.
毎日っていうか、夜の会議とかそういった部分でもその職員が1人担当として。
5 people, 7 sites. This basically meant nightly meetings every day and no rest for anyone. That was the biggest bottleneck.
いうところもあったので、まずは携わる職員について、きちんと
And so first off, there was the issue of how to handle the tasks at hand, but make sure that the team staff were properly rested. As for the mass relocation sites, these were being formed to eventually be part of the town.
一つの地域として成り立っていくっていう中にあって。
When we looked at the completed form, it was evident that the team staff was too involved in the mass relocation.
移転に携わる職員が深く関わりすぎてるっていう状況になると
Originally, we had to be involved in various ways. The team staff knew nothing about the area.
それぞれの担当部署の職員がその地域のことについて全くわからないというか、全くという形まではいかない。
Well, maybe not nothing, but they didn't know it well. And we were concerned that that would detract from our ability to develop the community for the future.
ということもあったので、本来のその町づくりの携わる職員がその
And we felt strongly that the team staff should understand the process behind developing a community at the mass relocation sites.
分かっているべきだろうなっていうのも強く思ってたので、そういう中で、担当
With that, even without leading up things directly, by having a site leader involved to gather information, they could understand about the site. We wanted to set up that kind of a structure.
地区のことを把握できるような形にしておくべきだろう。
And so the team proposed forming such site groups.
地区担当グループっていう形を整えることを、提言したというか提案したっていう形です。はい。
In promoting the development of new communities in the mass relocation process, City Hall engaged officials from all departments involved in community development by forming site groups of city officials from various departments for each mass relocation site so they could collaborate closely, and establishing a system for city officials to collaborate to build communities at the relocation sites.
やはり専門部署先ほど立ち上げたっていう形に
It turns out that if you set up a dedicated department, everyone feels like the job is that department's responsibility alone.
町づくりにおいては非常にマイナスに作用する。
And so doing so winds up putting you at a severe disadvantage in community development.
道路を作るんだったら建設家とかそういう形の部分で専門部署が普通の町づくり
In community development in normal times, it's understood that each dedicated section handles their specialty. The sewerage department handles the sewerage, the construction department builds the roads, and so on.
全てその手法だったり
At the time, however, we members of the relocation support team didn't understand how to do everything that was involved.
やり方っていうかその部分については把握して
It was the dedicated sections that knew their fields best.
復興を進める上でも円滑に進める上でもやはり大きいという部分で
Involving those officials was huge in terms of making the reconstruction progress smoothly.
地区担当として携わることによって責任を持って、
And so by taking responsibility by working as a site leader, not a specialist, and directing the work that way, there had to be a dedicated relocation team, as I said in the beginning.
専門の担当部署移転支援班というのがあるんであれば移転については
Then there were always comments of, shouldn't your team just handle the relocation?
っていう話になるのは違いますよと。
But we would say no.
移転
In the future, these relocation sites will be integrated into the town as ordinary districts, and they need to be developed as ordinary communities. On the other hand, when a specialised department doesn't know the area, the community development subsequently suffers. The idea was that had to be avoided.
避けなければならないという思いもあって各々当事者ですよと。
Your department is a stakeholder too, we'd tell them. While normally that department would ideally take their time and get involved in each relocation site, at present there are places all over the city that need to be restored and rebuilt.
なんだけども今はそういうことも全体の中
And so we'd explain to them that because of this, the relocation support team is taking the lead on their behalf. We didn't want the department officials to forget that utilizing their specialties as honed in their departments is the way things get done.
で専門的な知識を生
while at the same time wording things to make them feel like stakeholders.
ところもあって、当事者意識っていう言葉を使ったっていう形ですね。
One such mass relocation site is Aoi District. At about 22 hectares, Aoi is the largest of the 7 mass relocation sites with 580 homes. Ono Takeichi, the resident representative for Aoi Community Development in the mass relocation after the quake, recalls his thoughts on developing the new community at the time.
防災危険区域に指定されてもそこに人住んでダメだよ。
Our community was designated a disaster risk zone, and we were told that no one could live there anymore. For myself, if they would let me, I would have wanted to keep on living in the former community. But thinking of the future, of my grandkids, I figured that it wasn't an option and that the mass relocation was necessary.
ただその集団移転に向けてですね、実は大曲浜の
Leading up to the mass relocation,
実はもう
there were actually some in Omagari-hama right after it was designated as a risk zone, who figured that if we had to move, then we should pick the site ourselves. They started acting.
決めようと自分たちで決めようというふうなことをですね、動き始めて実はいたんですね。でその方々が亡くなった方
Some of them volunteered to go on the searches for bodies of those who died and help identify the bodies at the makeshift morgue to notify the families or act as contact to reach out to families.
ことの連絡係なんかもこう引き受けてくれてた有志の方々がいたんですね。でそういった方々の動きがあって。
It was such community volunteers who petitioned the city to propose Aoi District, where we are now, as the best place for the Omagari-hama community to resettle.
いうふうなことをですね、市の方にも答申をしてくれたんですね。で、そういった流れを組んで
With that, the government ultimately decided on building 7 sites, and the Aoi site our volunteers had discussed just so happened to be one of the choices. And so Aoi District was decided to be our mass relocation site.
生まれていたというふうな流れでこの青井地区の集団移転地が決まったということですね。
I was selected as chairman of the Aoi Community Development Council, and in my first speech I said that if we had to build somewhere new, we should try to make it the best in Japan. When they heard me say that, everyone must have wondered why I had to make such grand plans and talk so big.
大風呂敷を広げてるのっていうふうに聞いてたと思うんですね。
I just thought, what are we building for then? Our goal should be to be the best in Japan.
目標はじゃあ日本一
When asked what my objectives were, I gave them 3.
その目的もその時3つ私は皆さんにお話をしたんですね。
The first was to leave behind the best community in Japan for our grandchildren 20 or 30 years from now.
町として残したいと。で2つ
Second, the souls of the many victims had lost their homes, so I wanted to build Japan's best community as a home for them to return to.
帰ってくるふるさとを日本一の町として迎えてあげましょう。
And third, we were going to build a community with the support of organizations and volunteers from all over the country.
ボランティアさんいろんな方に支えられてこれから作っていく町なんです。
So as a way of showing gratitude to all of them, let's build the best community in Japan. Those were the 3 objectives I gave. With that, they weren't sure if we could do it, but everyone agreed to give it a shot.
できるかどうかわかんないけどもやってみようよっていうふうな形で皆さん思っていただいたと思うんですね。
And so through numerous council meetings between the residents looking to resettle and the city running the mass relocation project, reconstruction and community development progressed at the mass relocation sites. What were the council meetings like?
これはですね、最初はですね、なかなか
Honestly, we didn't see eye to eye at first and made no progress.
やはり移転されるっていう形の方々っていうのは、
Those who were relocating had lost their homes. Some of them had lost family.
集団移転をする新しい町については特に思い入れがあるっていうか。
This gave them a particular emotional attachment and desires for the new community they were all to be resettled in. There were many requests and opinions.
あったと思うんですね。でそれに対して行政側ではいつまでに
For the government's part, we had time constraints to finish by a certain time. We had budgetary limitations to do it within a certain budget scale.
制限、あとは法律的な制限、なんかもあって、それらも含めて
And there were also legal limitations. Given the constraints we were under, we were bound to diverge some of their dreams.
乖離があるっていうかいうところもあったので、まあどちらかというと
Inevitably, there were many points where we had to say, we can't do this and that at the same time, so can't we work something out?
できないのかっていう住民の移転者の方々の思いと乖離があって平行線
And so, given the divergence with relocating resident ideas, there wasn't much progress in the beginning. Time went on and we were making no progress. The two sides were constantly at odds, unable to agree with the other side.
いうところまでこう行き着いたっていうか、その中でこのままでは
Then both sides began to see that at this rate, we would never achieve the new community we wanted to build. When that set in, both sides started searching for what we needed to get the talks moving more smoothly.
うまく話し合いが持てるのかっていうところを探り始めたんですお互いに。でその中で
To that point, the government side was being as indirect and roundabout as they could.
話をするっていうか、まあ、遠回しな言い方をするっていう形の部分でやってったんですけども、まあ、それが正直に言ってくれ
So the townspeople asked us to just be straight with them, to just tell them up front what budget they had to work within.
最初に教えてくれよと。そうすればその中で、ね、予算の範囲でこうやれるようなことを
Then they said they would give their opinions on what could be done within that budget, and that if we told them when it had to be done by, that they would push the conversation to get things done by then.
やればいいのか教えてもらえればその期限に合わせて、話を進めていくっていうことも考えるよって言ってくれたの
The
で
best thing is to just be straight on such points. Some things are just impossible. On those points, we made sure to say as much. When something was impossible, we made it a point to explain why in particular detail.
ことについてはきちんとできるだけ丁寧に説明をするという形にしました。
There were a lot of things that couldn't be done due to the budget, legal, and time constraints.
時間的な制約によって、まあできないっていうことも多くありました。
But for those items which the relocating residents felt important enough to request and opine about,
それなりのまあ移転者の方々の思いもあったので、まあこういう理由でこう
we felt it necessary to explain things in more detail, that we only had so much budget. With that said, once they had understood the reasons, we'd ask if they had any other alternatives that we could consider.
もしあればそちらの方で、対応していくっていうことも考えたいと思いますっていう代替案的なものを、まあ、提示をしていただいて
We'd ask them to present any alternative ideas and tell them, we can't do that, but if there's another way, another method, we can try. Then we'll try that. We'd present them with that option.
であればそちらで対応していくよっていうことも、まあ、提示をしていったという形の部分はありました。
そうですね。初めのうちはどうしても行政指導で
In the beginning, the government side took the stance that it was their way or the highway.
私がこう行政の皆さん
What I kept telling them was that the plan they were pushing was all well and good, but ultimately we would be the ones that had to live there.
実際にそこに住むのは私たちなんだよねと。行政の方が自分で作った
That it's not like they'd actually be living in this place they made. That said, we could hold workshops or meetings to let the residents each share whatever circumstances, items, thoughts, and requests they had.
なんかを通じて意見を出させますので、その意見に沿ったよう
Why don't we work together to build a community that aligns with those opinions? If we insisted on 100% of our requests, then of course there would be some selfish requests mixed in there. So if they could meet 70 to 80% of our requests, then we'll be satisfied.
70%、80%私たちは満足できるようなものであれば、私たちは
I asked the government if they wouldn't also work towards that goal with us.
していただけませんかというふうなお話をしてですね、
And with that, many months after the Development Council had convened, we finally built a relationship to work together smoothly.
割とこうスムーズにいける
That's how I remember it.
お互いの関係になっていったというふうに記憶しておりますね。
At the start, when the Mass Relocation Site Community Development Council discussions began, the relocating residents and city clashed over their difference of opinions. Then, the residents and government found a way to work together and press forward with community development. The city quickly presented their proposal for resettlement plans, told the residents how long they had to modify the plan, clearly stated what could and could not be done, and made an effort to plainly explain the reasons when something couldn't be done. From the relocating residents, they picked and chose what they really needed from among their many wishes, presented a prioritised list of requests, discussed alternatives with the city for those requests which couldn't be achieved, and looked to build consensus among the relocating residents.
できるだけその移転者の
We felt like the relocating residents' opinions were reflected in the plans as much as possible.
逆にもつながってる形が大きかったかなと。
That was big in terms of building attachment to the area.
まちづくり整備協議会の会長をされてた小野武一さんも
The chairman of the Relocation Community Development Council at the time, Mr. Takeichi Ono, had taken the position of making it the best community in Japan.
地域の愛着っていうところでは自分たちの意見がここに反映されている形の町
He was pushing forward with various goals. In terms of attachment to the community, you could sense that he was devoted to building a community that reflected resident opinions and a community that they built.
込められているっていうところもあるのでこの町を守っていくっていうところの気持ちにもつながってるのかなって行政職員は行政職員
You got the impression that he would defend that community. The City Hall staff thought about it, and I think they responded to various items. In part, I think we were a little reluctant about listening to relocating resident opinions.
部分はあるのかな。先ほどもちょっとお話しした通り、やはり批判につながるというところもあって、それを
As I said earlier, we were afraid to raise certain topics that might invite criticism, so we held back out of fear of that. It led to us pushing to build the community our way, and as resident opinions didn't match our plans, we eventually had to go back to the beginning and start the whole community development process from scratch.
形の部分になってしまっているケースも多々あるんじゃないのかな。それよりも
I think that happens in a lot of cases. Rather, the shortest path is to talk things through properly from the start and remain close throughout the community building process. That way, you can proceed without having to backtrack. Slow and steady wins the race.
最短距離で街づくりを進めることにもなるっていう形もあるので、
So in community development, frankly explain your side of the situation without being afraid of establishing a dialogue. And doing so will result in the fastest path forward.
いくっていうことをした方が、結果的に早く街づくりを進められるんじゃないかなと。
I very much felt that to be true in our community development after the Great East Japan earthquake. If you actively look to establish discussion and try to speak openly, it will lead to developing a mutual understanding.
心がけていけば
I hope that you will actively discuss the facts before proceeding with your community development.
積極的に話し合いをした上で街づくりを進めてほしいなと思っております。
In the development of the mass relocation sites in the city of Higashi-Matsushima, despite the occasional clash of ideas on the reconstruction, the residents and city established an active dialogue. The development reflects many resident wishes and has created a new home that we can love.